My name is Jasmine Price, and I am a 46-year-old schoolteacher in Georgia. What I'm about to share with you is my near-death experience testimony of what happened when Jesus showed me the shocking truth about the true origins of Black people. I literally saw and experienced something that completely changed my understanding of Black people, their history, and their connections to the divine. But before we start, please let me know where you're listening from. It will be nice to feel closer, even if we're physically apart. Also, don't forget to like and comment on what you thought about this near-death experience testimony. Let's have a fair and open discussion so we can learn from each other on this channel. Enjoy listening. It happened on August 4th, 2020. I had been struggling with health issues for months, tired, drained, and in pain that couldn't be traced to any one source. My doctors were stumped, but it wasn't until that evening that everything came to a head. I remember sitting in the living room, chatting with my husband about the kids and their homework when suddenly, everything went black. It's hard to describe what happened after that. One moment, I was in my home, and the next, I was outside of it. I wasn't in my body anymore. I felt light and weightless even. I found myself in a vast, illuminated space. It was as though the very air was made of light, radiant and warm. And there, standing in front of me, was Jesus. He was clothed in brilliant white robes, and his eyes looked straight into my soul. I felt love, comfort, and compassion all at once. It was as if all the fear I had ever known was washed away. I knew in that moment that I was in the presence of someone who held all the answers. Jesus didn't speak at first, but then he spoke softly, gently, "Welcome, Jasmine. You're here for a reason." As I stood before him, 1,000 questions raced through my mind. But before I could speak, Jesus began to talk, and in the next few moments, he started to explain things that would completely change the way I saw the world around me. One of the first things he revealed to me was the curse of Ham. I had heard the story before. Who hadn't? Growing up in the church, I had heard that Black people were cursed because of Noah's son Ham. It was a concept that seemed to make sense to many, one that people often use to justify racial injustice, slavery, and discrimination. But Jesus told me that this was all wrong. "Jasmine, the curse of Ham has been misunderstood for centuries," he said. "The curse was never meant to fall on Black people." I was stunned, my mind racing to catch up with his words. He explained that the curse was not on Ham, but on Canaan, the son of Ham. The Bible in Genesis 9 verses 18 to 29 spoke of Noah becoming drunk and exposing himself to his sons. When Ham saw his father in that state and did not cover him, Noah placed a curse not on Ham but on Canaan, Ham's son. Then I saw how the curse on Canaan symbolizes the prophetic message about the future descendants of Canaan and the conflicts that would arise. This shifted my understanding entirely, and I felt an overwhelming sense of clarity as Jesus spoke. The curse was specifically directed at Canaan, and not the entire lineage of Ham. It wasn't Black people who were cursed, it was Canaan and his descendants. But somehow, throughout history, the truth had been twisted, and people had used this misinterpretation to justify their own prejudices and hurtful ideologies. Jesus explained to me that the curse was about disobedience, spiritual failure, and not a racial issue. It was a matter of sin, not skin color. Jesus showed me that over time, this distortion had become deeply ingrained in society, leading to centuries of abuse and discrimination. People had misunderstood the message, and that misunderstanding had caused untold harm to generations of people. As we walked together through that glorious space, Jesus shared with me the truth about the origins of Black people. I had always believed, like many others, that Black people were somehow lesser or had been cursed in some way. But Jesus revealed the divine blessing behind the African heritage. "Jasmine," he said, "you have believed many false things about the African people, but I will show you the truth. The Black people, the descendants of Ham, have been misunderstood, and their true story has been distorted for centuries. It was never about a curse, but about a divine plan and blessing." He showed me the significance of Ham's descendants, especially Kush, Mizraim, and Put. Kush, he explained, was the father of the ancient African peoples, the ones who gave birth to the great Kingdom of Kush, which existed alongside Egypt as one of the great civilizations of antiquity. Jesus smiled. Their history is not one of disgrace, but of honor and strength. What struck me the most was when Jesus explained that the name Kush itself meant black in the biblical sense. The term black, he said, was never a mark of shame. In the ancient world, it symbolized beauty, power, and the strength of a people. He paused to let the weight of his words sink in. Blackness was not a curse, but a blessed and sacred identity, though it has been misrepresented over time. Through Jesus, I came to understand that Kush's descendants were a vital part of the plan God had for humanity. These people, he said, were blessed by God with wisdom, leadership, and divine favor. The African nations of Ethiopia, Kush, Nubia, and Egypt were not cursed. They were divinely inspired and chosen for a higher purpose in the ancient world. One of the most profound revelations Jesus gave me was about ancient Egypt. I had always been drawn to the history and mysteries of Egypt. The pyramids, the gods and goddesses, and the incredible achievements of the ancient Egyptians had fascinated me since I was a child. But I had never understood the deeper divine connection Egypt had with the story of creation and the ancient peoples of God. Jasmine, Egypt was never meant to be seen only as a place of bondage, Jesus said. It is a cradle of civilization, a place where wisdom and knowledge are shared with the world. Jesus explained that Mizraim, one of Ham's sons, was the father of the Egyptians. The Egyptians, he continued, were part of the same blessed lineage as Kush. They were a chosen people who were entrusted with great knowledge and wisdom, knowledge that was later passed down to other cultures around the world. Egypt wasn't just a place of enslavement, he said, it was a place of divine wisdom, a source of knowledge that was meant to be shared. The teachings of the pharaohs, the great spiritual leaders, were part of my plan to shape the world. Jesus looked at me with compassion. I understand the pain you've carried, seeing Egypt's role in the enslavement of the Israelites. But the Egyptians, despite their fall into idolatry, were once divinely chosen to spread wisdom and light to all nations. As I stood there with Jesus, absorbing all that he was showing me, I felt something profound shift in my soul. I had spent my life feeling disconnected and unsure of my place in the world. But Jesus was showing me a new truth, a truth of divine heritage that stretched back to the beginning of time. He then revealed how the misinterpretations of the Bible, the twisting of truths about race and identity, had led to centuries of pain, discrimination, and hurt. But the time for healing has come, he said. The time for truth is now. The curse of Ham was never a curse at all. It was a spiritual misunderstanding, a misunderstanding that has been used to oppress, distort, and obscure the beauty of Black people's heritage. As Jesus continued to guide me through that luminous space, the profound peace and clarity I felt were unlike anything I had ever known in my earthly life. The truth was like a balm, soothing the wounds of my past. He had already shown me the truth about the curse of Ham, how it had been misinterpreted to justify centuries of hatred and oppression. But there was still more to uncover, and Jesus, patient as ever, began to take me deeper into the mysteries of Black people's divine origin. Jasmine, there is more to the story, he said. I want you to see the legacy of strength, wisdom, and love that was passed down through generations of my people. At that moment, he revealed a grand tapestry of civilizations, Ethiopia, Nubia, Kush, Egypt, and others, all born from the descendants of Kush. These nations, Jesus explained, were central to God's plan for humanity. They played a critical role in shaping the world long before the confusion and division that would come. I was shown the ancient Kingdom of Kush, which thrived along the Nile River. The people of Kush were not only mighty in battle, but also wise in spiritual matters. They were stewards of sacred knowledge, Jesus said. Their wisdom about creation and the divine laws of the universe was a gift from God, meant to illuminate the hearts of all nations. I saw artifacts, ancient temples, and writings that spoke of a deep and intimate connection with God, one that many people today were completely unaware of. I felt a surge of emotion as I saw the great Nubian queens, such as Queen Amenirines and Queen Makeda, who led their people with grace, courage, and strength. These women were not only political leaders, Jesus said, but spiritual leaders. They understood the divine calling upon their lives to guide their people with wisdom and love. They were beloved in my sight. The Kingdom of Egypt, too, stood as a testament to God's divine blessing. Jesus showed me that the Egyptians, despite their later fall into idolatry, had been at the forefront of spiritual and intellectual discovery. Egypt was a cradle of wisdom, he explained. It was never meant to be a place of bondage, but a place where divine knowledge flourished. I was shown how Moses, the great prophet, had been raised in Pharaoh's palace, not by accident, but by divine purpose. Moses was placed in Egypt, Jesus said, to draw from the great wisdom of the Egyptians. He was called to lead my people out, but Egypt, in its early days, was meant to be a source of light, a beacon of wisdom from which many nations would be blessed. What the world calls idolatry in Egypt was once a part of their spiritual path, Jesus explained. They sought to understand the divine, but they got lost along the way. Still, the foundation of their wisdom was rooted in truth. I began to see how the descendants of Africa spread throughout the world. The African diaspora, which includes the forced movement of millions of African people through slavery, was not a random occurrence. It was a part of God's larger plan. I saw how African ancestors had carried their wisdom, faith, and resilience across the globe, even in the face of overwhelming suffering. Jesus showed me that slavery, one of the darkest chapters in human history, was not something God ordained, but rather the result of human sin and greed. Yet, even in that pain, the African people had carried with them a divine spark, a deep sense of hope, faith, and strength that could never be extinguished. This divine strength had survived generations of suffering, and it was this strength that made the Black community so resilient. Jasmine, the African people are not just survivors. They are my warriors, my children, carrying a divine legacy that has been passed down for millennia. Jesus spoke these words with such conviction that I felt them deep in my soul. As I pondered his words, I saw visions of Black spiritual leaders, from the abolitionists to civil rights leaders like Martin Luther King Jr., who had been inspired by this divine spark. These individuals were not only fighting for freedom but for justice in alignment with divine will. I saw how God had always been with the African people, even in their darkest hours, raising up prophets, leaders, and activists to speak for his truth and to guide his people toward a brighter future. Then Jesus led me to the understanding of African spirituality. I had always wondered about the spiritual practices of my ancestors, the rituals, the respect for ancestors, the connection to the earth and nature. Jesus explained to me that these practices, when kept pure, were not in opposition to God but were an expression of the deep spiritual connection that the African people had with the divine. Jasmine, your ancestors knew that they were connected to the earth, to the stars, to all creation. They understood that the divine is in all things, and that all things can be used to honor God. Jesus showed me how the practice of honoring ancestors in many African cultures was not about worshiping the dead, but about acknowledging the wisdom and sacrifices of those who had come before. Honoring your ancestors, he explained, is not about idolizing them, but recognizing their place in the divine story. It is about staying connected to the wisdom and love that flows through generations. I saw images of ancient African rituals, where the people danced, sang, and communed with God through the elements: fire, water, air, and earth. These rituals were rooted in the understanding that God's presence was not confined to a building or a book, but pervaded all of creation. I am present in all things, Jesus said. My presence flows through the earth, the wind, the water, and the fire. The rituals you see were expressions of the deep connection between the Creator and his creation. I understood then that spirituality was not confined to one culture or religion but was a universal experience, one that could manifest in many forms, but always with the same divine origin. As my journey with Jesus continued, he began to explain to me the struggles and trials that African people, and Black Americans, had endured throughout history. I saw how the struggle for freedom, equality, and justice was not just a matter of human effort but was deeply tied to a divine purpose, one that had been prophesied and predestined by God. Jasmine, Jesus said, the struggle of the Black community is not just a fight for human rights, it is a spiritual battle. It is a battle for the restoration of divine truth and justice on earth. Their fight is a fight for the dignity, the honor, and the rightful place that has always been theirs in my kingdom. They are my beloved, and I have heard their cries. This revelation was powerful. It meant that the pain, the suffering, and the oppression experienced by Black people were not in vain. They were part of a larger cosmic struggle for truth and justice. The African American community's fight for equality was not just a political or social movement, it was a spiritual calling. God had seen the injustices and was using this community to bring change to the world. I was shown that the strength of the Black community, from the resilience of African slaves to the civil rights movements, was a manifestation of God's divine purpose. These struggles, though painful, were part of God's plan to restore truth, love, and unity to the earth. I began to understand the role of the African people in the divine plan of salvation. Jesus explained that the struggles faced by Black people were a testimony to the world, a testimony of how the divine spark within them had never been extinguished, even in the face of overwhelming adversity. Jasmine, the return of my people, my children, will come in a time of great awakening. The truth about their identity and purpose will be revealed to the world, and with it will come a time of restoration and unity. I was given a vision of the return of Jesus, where he would return to bring justice, peace, and reconciliation to all people, especially to the Black community. The truth about their divine origin would no longer be hidden. The world would finally see the blessing that had been misunderstood for so long. As I began to return to my earthly body, I felt a deep sense of peace and gratitude. The divine heritage of Black people was not something to be ashamed of or hidden. It was a sacred gift, one that had been passed down through generations, and one that would continue to shine as a beacon of hope, strength, and divine purpose. When I finally woke up in the hospital, I was changed. The doctors told me that I had been clinically dead for over 12 minutes, but I knew I had experienced something that could never be explained by science alone. I had seen the divine plan unfold before me, and most of all, I had been shown the love and mercy of Jesus, who had revealed to me the true and sacred role of the Black people in the story of God's kingdom. If you're watching this, I want you to know that what I experienced was not just for me, but for all of us. The truth revealed to me is that Black people are not cursed, they are divinely chosen, with a rich legacy of strength, wisdom, and purpose. Our struggles are part of a larger spiritual battle, but in the end, healing and restoration will come. If you're Black, know that you are part of something greater. You are loved, chosen, and powerful. And if you're from another background, the message of unity and healing is for you too. Together, we can heal the world through understanding and love.